Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Luis Perez. I'm an educator, like many of you, and my focus is on accessibility and inclusive universal design, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So I want to begin with one of my favorite sections of the speech that George Bush Sr. gave when he signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law in 1990. And he said this: together we must remove the physical barriers we have created and the social barriers that we have accepted. For ours will never be a truly prosperous nation until all within it prosper, which is a great sentiment. And without a doubt, the Americans with Disabilities Act is a landmark civil rights legislation, and it has led to many protections for people like myself, giving us the opportunity to pursue an education, to find employment, and also to have access to public accommodations. But we have some work to do in order to realize that promise that was made. Today, only about 6% of individuals with disabilities have obtained a college education. Individuals between the ages of 21 and 64, that is what we consider working age. That's important because when individuals with disabilities don't have a college education, their overall career outcomes tend to be lower. They're more likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to require assistance, which of course comes at a cost to our society. But more important than that, we miss out on the talent and the contributions that they can make to solving some of the problems that we have in our society. Even those that do go on to get an education, I'm an example of that, we face a number of challenges, and it takes us on average twice as long to complete our education than our non-disabled peers. So we have some work to do. The good news is we have made some progress as well as a result of the ADA. And so the buildings in our college campuses are much more accessible than they were in the early 90s when I was first going through college. That's definitely a development that should be commended, that universities have been working really hard to make their campuses more accessible. So the buildings are easier to get into. We have automatic doors. We have redesigned entrances. It's easier to get around on campus because we have curb cuts and we have ramps. Now the question is, do we have access to what happens inside the buildings? And so that's what I want to talk about today, because we want to have not only access to the building, but access to what happens inside the building. So today I'm going to be talking to you about two concepts: universal design, and that relates to having access, physical access to the buildings, and also having access to information. Just being able to perceive the information is important, being able to hear it, being able to see it. But there's another component that we need to work on, which is universal design for learning. And that's access to learning, which is much more than access to information. You have to be able to do something with that information and turn it into usable knowledge. So let me begin with universal design. This is a concept from the world of architecture. That's where it originated. And to give you a quick definition, it's basically the design of buildings, environments, and products. So from the outset, they accommodate the widest spectrum of users. A great example of that are the curb cuts that I mentioned earlier. These were designed for people with disabilities who use wheelchairs. But it just so happens that delivery men love curb cuts, right? If you have a cart and you're carrying stuff into a building, it's great to have curb cuts. Parents with young children who are pushing a stroller love curb cuts. Young people who ride a bike love curb cuts. So this is a feature that was designed for people with disabilities, but it now benefits the rest of society. There are lots of other groups that take advantage of it on a daily basis. So if I had to summarize universal design in one phrase, is that accessibility is built in rather than added on. So right from the start, as part of the design process, we consider who's going to be using the technology and how can we make it accessible from the beginning so that there are no barriers inherent in that design. The great news is that a lot of the technology that our students are bringing to school now have these accessibility features that are built into them. And I'm going to share a little bit about that with you later. Now I'm focusing on Apple devices because that's what I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator. But I want you to, just consider these tools. And whatever you have on your campus is likely to have very similar accessibility features. So I invite you to explore those accessibility features no matter what type of technology you're using, because a lot of the companies are now paying attention to this. As our population ages, accessibility becomes everybody's concern, unless you found the fountain of youth. Accessibility is also really important when you talk about mobile devices because a lot of us become situationally disabled when we use mobile devices. Just to give you a couple of examples. If you use your iPhone on a really sunny day, you become situationally disabled. If you're using your phone to make a call in a very loud environment and you're trying to watch a video for class, to review for a test, and you can't hear the video, you become situationally disabled. So accessibility is about more than just meeting the needs of people with disabilities. It's really about meeting the needs of all of society. So as I said, a lot of these features are already built in. Industry is taking this into consideration and including accessibility right out of the box, rather than you having to purchase separate software or install anything. So really what we need now is the equivalent of curb cuts for learning. Or another way that I think about it is adjustable seats for learning. Right? Adjustable seats allow you to customize your car. They allow you to customize the way you're sitting when you're watching a movie. We need the same concept for learning, making learning flexible and adjustable so that it can meet the diversity of our students. So that's where universal design for learning comes from. It really kind of extends that idea of universal design from architecture, from product design, into the learning environment. Universal design for learning is mentioned in the Higher Education Opportunity Act, 2008, and they describe it as a scientifically valid framework for guiding educational practice in a way that eliminates barriers and maintains high expectations for all students. And that includes students with disabilities, it includes our English language learners as well. It's also mentioned in our National Education Technology Plan as a way that we can create an educational system that works for everybody. So at the core of universal design for learning is the idea of brain networks. We have 1 trillion neurons in our brain. And those 1 trillion neurons can be connected in approximately 10 trillion ways. We don't know, nobody sat there and counted every single one of them. So this is just an approximation. So when you consider such a complex system, the idea that we can design an education that's a one-size-fits-all education, to me doesn't make sense. So when you have a complex system like this, variability is kind of the organizing principle of that system. And so that's what it is for our learners. They bring with them a great deal of variability in how they perceive and process information and how they are engaged in learning. So universal design for learning is based on the latest research about the brain. One of the centers that's conducted a lot of this research is CAS, the Center for Applied Specialized Technology, based in Massachusetts. And they've looked at the brain on their brain imaging machines. And even though there's a great deal of learner variability, there are 3 networks that consistently show up in these studies. The first of these is the affective network. So this is our self-regulation and our motivation for learning. We kind of examine the environment and we look for things that are emotionally relevant to us or that motivate us, and then we base our actions on that information. So that's the affective network, our motivation for learning. The recognition network, and I have a word to represent each of these. So the first network is the why. So it motivates you to do what you do. The second network is the what. This is all the information that we receive through our senses. But it's more than that, because we also make use of context. And so this network is tuned for recognizing patterns in information. But a lot of times, the way that we recognize that information is through our prior knowledge and our prior experience. And practice can have an impact on that as well. The more you practice something, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to recognize a pattern. The final network is the strategic network. And this network helps us plan, execute, and monitor tasks. So for example, when you ask a student to write an essay, this is the network that kind of helps them think through the steps of what they're going to do. Or when they're solving a math problem, this is the network that kind of helps them organize the steps for solving that problem. So these 3 networks, I'm covering them here separately as the why, the what, and the how of learning, but they're really interconnected. Just like the neurons in our brains are interconnected, we don't make use of one of these networks at a time. Any learning activity engages all 3 at the same time. So to support each of these 3 networks, what CAS has done is they develop a set of principles, which we know as universal design for learning. And for each network, there's a corresponding principle. For the affective network, that's multiple means of engagement. And the idea is to give learners choices so that they kind of develop their self-efficacy over time and they take ownership of their learning. One way we can do that is by involving them in project-based learning. Because one of the things we want to do is make learning meaningful and relevant. And so if we present knowledge as just a separated collection of facts that's separated from context, then it may not be as relevant to our learners. But when we present it in terms of what they know, their life experience, their prior knowledge, then we have a way to hook them into learning, to prime them for learning. So that's multiple means of engagement. And by the way, I saw that there are a few sessions on related topics, so I'm going to give you kind of a high-level overview, but I encourage you to go to the sessions on the program that touch on this in more detail. And then the last 2 networks and how you support them. For the recognition network, you provide multiple means of representation. So essentially, rather than just lecturing, you find other ways that you can present the information. That could be a video, that could be a simulation, that could be a physical object that you explore. That could be hands-on activities. So the idea here is to not allow the format of the information to become a barrier. So that's why we present it in a variety of formats, so that every learner, depending on their learning style, has a way that they can connect to the information. And then for the strategic network, we support that by providing multiple means of action and expression. So we provide learners with options for how they show what they've learned. So it doesn't have to be the essay. I know I've assigned a lot of essays in my time. I'm a reformed essay grader. So it's not just essays, it's not just multiple choice tests, but maybe they can design an interactive poster, or they can create a documentary about a problem that they're exploring. And when we do this, we're not only making the information more accessible to them, but we're also providing them with practice in developing those 21st century skills. As the first presenter mentioned, these soft skills, right? Collaboration, cooperation, and communication. And communication will take different forms in the future. So it may not always be in writing. It may be in developing a persuasive video that changes the world, or at least one that gets lots of views on Facebook or Instagram. So the basic idea, before I go on to the next slide, is that with universal design for learning, it's not just about learning the information, a specific set of information, or mastering a specific set of skills. It's about becoming an expert learner, a learner that has strategies for learning that can be adapted to new environments. Again, tying back to what was mentioned earlier, we don't know what the jobs of the future are going to be. Most of them probably haven't been invented yet, because those jobs are going to be there to solve problems we don't even know we have yet. So the idea is we can't give them the information to solve those problems yet. We can't give them the skills. But what we can give them is the ability to be an expert learner who can look at a problem and then come up with an innovative solution. So where do mobile devices fit into all this? Well, they fit in quite nicely into each of these networks. So for the effective network, with mobile devices, you've probably heard the expression, it was used earlier, there's an app for that. How many of you have heard of that? In fact, there's 1 billion apps for that. So there is a chance that maybe if one app doesn't work for a student, it doesn't get their attention, it doesn't keep their attention, there's a chance that you can find another one that does from that 1 billion apps that are out there. We can also now create digital textbooks for mobile devices that are much more interactive than the textbooks that I experienced when I was in college was. Even when they created a digital version then, it was basically a photocopy of the book. But now we can make them interactive with embedded videos, embedded models. I've seen books where you can actually rotate a DNA molecule as you study it. You can rotate a 3D model of a building to explore it in more detail, right in the book, without exiting to a separate app. For those who have sensory disabilities or who just need another option for accessing the information, there are a set of accessibility features built into our mobile devices, such as support for closed captioning or a screen reader for those who are blind so that they can access the information in audio format or in Braille even. And speech selection, which I'm going to demo for you in a few minutes, which is essentially text-to-speech, something that just a few years ago we used to pay hundreds of dollars to install, but now it's included out of the box. So again, we're providing options for how people access the information. For action and expression, you don't always have to type the information now. You can use dictation, built-in dictation, or Siri. And Siri is not just for like asking funny things, like where to hide a body, which is one of the things you can ask Siri, believe it or not. There are much more useful features built into it. And then finally, switch access. It turns out that the touch interface can be really difficult for certain people. Not just people with disabilities, but also as we get older, we may suffer from arthritis or something like that. And so there is now switch access built into these devices so that you can use with one finger, one tap. As long as you can make a minimum movement with your finger, you can control the interface using adaptive technology. So what I thought I would do, and it'll take me a second to set this up, is give you a quick demo of a few of these features. And I got to keep track of time as well. So if you want to follow along, you can certainly follow along. You can pull out your iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch. There is one point where I'll ask you not to follow along. because I'm going to demonstrate a feature that's intended for those who are blind, and you may not know how to get out of it. And I don't want you to send me hate email later. So give me 1 second, and I'll get set up on my iPad here. That should be okay. And actually, I won't plug in the audio because I can just do it from the microphone. Would you mind moving the microphone closer to me? Let me know if the iPad shows up. All right, perfect. Now, my cable here is not very long, so I can move it up to the front. Now, you're there in case I fall, then you catch my fall. You're my spotter. So what I'm going to do here, if you want to follow along, I'm going to go into my settings. So on your iPad or other iOS device, you're going to find an app called Settings. Looks like a little spider web, gray icon. I'm going to tap on that icon, and then over on the left side, I'm going to choose General. Over on the right side, I'm going to choose Accessibility. Now, once I do that, I'll see a number of options here, and they're grouped into different categories based on what you need. So again, that's the idea of that flexibility. So we have options for people who have visual difficulties, those who have hearing difficulties, those who have motor impairments, and then an access for learning called guided access. That applies more to K-12. What guided access allows us to do is we can lock the iPad into an app so that while they're studying, they don't go out to play Angry Birds or surf Instagram or Facebook. So that may not apply as much to you, your environment, but it's a great option for those of us who work in K-12. So what I'm going to do here is show you how to configure speech selection. So I'm going to go under Vision, and then I'll choose Speech Selection. I've already turned it on. It's really easy to turn it on and off. You just tap the option there, the one button at the top. And then I can go under Voices, and yours may look a little bit differently because I'm running iOS 7, which is the latest version. So if you don't see it the same way, you can just do a free update, and it will bring it up to the latest version. So in here, I can choose from a number of different languages. And for some of these languages, like I'm going to go under English, I can choose different dialects. So it just so happens that I think Australian accents are sexy. Much sexier than the English voice that's built into this. So I went in and I made Australian my default voice for English. Also, I'm a Spanish speaker, but if you're from the US and you meet somebody from England, you'll notice that their English is a little bit different. It's the same thing for us. I'm from Latin America. The Spanish that they use by default on the iPad is from Spain. So I can understand it, but it just doesn't have the same flavor that I like as Dominican Spanish or Mexican Spanish. So I went in and I changed that as well. So again, I'm customizing the experience for what I need. Once I've set up my voice, I can go in and change my speaking rate. And so I can make that really fast. You may not hear it back there. A little bit fast, that's if you had a lot of coffee in the morning. That's a little bit too slow, that's if you didn't sleep enough the night before. So what I generally do is I put it in about a quarter or a third of the way, and that seems to work pretty well. The last feature here is word highlighting. And this is what I find most useful about this feature. What that lets you do is if it reads the text out loud, it's also going to highlight it. And that's really helpful for our learners who have dyslexia and other learning difficulties, because it helps them with the encoding of the text. So now that we've set it up in our settings, I can go into an app called Notes, and I have some text so that I can show you the feature in action. So I'm going to exit here. I'm going to go into my notes, and then I can double tap any word here. Use the handles to draw a selection, and then a menu will pop up that says Speak. I'll tap Speak. Oh, I lost my selection. I'm trying to do it while also speaking to you on the microphone. This was really cool. I have some Spanish text, right? I'm going to highlight that, tap Speak. I didn't have to choose the language. It knew that I had written something in Spanish. So it switched to voice automatically. And so that will work with ebooks as well. It will know to switch the voice to the language, when you have an ebook that's in multiple languages. So again, this feature was originally designed for those who are blind or who have low vision. And it turns out that most of the people that use it are people with learning disabilities. So you can see sometimes we design something with one group in mind, and it benefits other groups. So how much time do I have? 5 minutes? All right. So I will just leave it at that, speak selection. I have some resources for you. So we're doing pretty good on time then. Let me get the cable over here. I have the video, just fell out. That's it. Thank you. So what I want to do is leave you with some resources here. I want to share a story, a quick story as well. Am I on the screen? So these features, if you want to learn more about them, there is a YouTube site that I've created. One of the things that I do is I do screencast videos, and I try to practice what I preach, so they're closed captioned. So you could watch them and follow along with the text if you need that. You can just do a search for LF Perez 72 on YouTube, and I have a collection for the latest version, iOS 7 as well. So these technologies are really cool. They do a lot. But what's really important is the impact that they have on people's lives. I already told you a little bit about me. I went to college a long time ago, then went into the workforce, and then finally went back to get first a master's and then a doctorate, which I just completed this year. So these technologies are things that I use, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about them. But I also, in my work, see the impact that they have on people's lives. And one group that I'm really passionate about that I work with is our veterans. We have a lot of veterans coming back from war. A lot of them are coming back with injuries. Some of them are very visible, and some of them not so much, like PTSD. Well, a lot of these students are going to be enrolling in your courses. They're coming to your university. And I want to share the story of one of these students, Sergeant Joel Tavera. So Sergeant Joel Tavera, according to the Department of Defense, is the second worst injured Iraq veteran. He was in a vehicle that was hit by 5 missiles, and it caught on fire. He was the only survivor because he had the door open, and he was thrown from the vehicle. He lost a leg, he lost most of a hand, he's blind, and he suffered severe burns over 70% of his body. He also spent 81 days in a coma. So I thought I would let him tell you what this technology means to him in his own words through a video. So you can see Joel, that's Joel before, this is Joel today, over 70% of his body. He also spent 81 days in a coma. So I thought I would let him tell you what this technology means to him in his own words through a video. So you can see Joel, that's Joel before, this is Joel today.
Technology has made a huge difference in my life. Being a full computer type guy, I cannot get back online, especially based on the soft government, and send reconnect with those who are most important. Technology is about us. I think they actually, myself, was our team in one case, the last good question I come forward. One wonderful. We have all the accessibility, inclusion that, all the applications. I can find out locally, how those are good reasons. There's other stuff up here. that have less propensity to tactile activities. But you think outside the box,
so as Joel said, I think if we think outside the box, if we're creative, we can come up with solutions that will work not only for our veterans like Joel, but for all of our students who have disabilities, and ultimately through universal design and universal design for learning for all of our learners. But to do this, we're going to have to work at the intersection of technology and pedagogy. So it's not enough to provide access through universal design. We're also going to have to incorporate universal design for learning. Thank you very much.